how do you set expectations for a company that's looking at AI? Because I would imagine that some think it's a panacea. It's going to fix every problem I have for both internally and my customers. So how do you talk to them about sort of, defining and making sure that they don't oversell it even within the organization?
Yeah, I think that's really important as well, because one of the challenges that we often hear about and talk to our clients about is sometimes the change management, right? And the nervousness within an organization can actually create a barrier in terms of the successful implementation. And so, really, and as Leslie has said and Pat said, it's about finding and identifying where is the pain point or what is the challenge you're trying to overcome, right? And by when, right? And then working out with them, how do we step towards that? So how do we create the short-term plan to, maybe even build the proof of concept or the prototype? And there's a lot of that stuff going on out there at the moment. There's a lot of experimentation in this field. But then how do you learn from that to then build the next step, and then how do you build that employee confidence in the organization that this is something that's going to enhance their experience and therefore the experience that they will have with their customers, and rather than it be a threat, right? And all of that needs to be worked through as well.
Pat, when that is happening, is there any concern about using the term AI within the organization as you're trying to sell this to people, as you're trying to get them excited about these terms?
Pat doesn't use the term AI, actually. He doesn't actually sell AI. His firm doesn't move into that realm, do you?
Well, we're a platform for it, and so we see, and I invented the term robotic process automation, RPA, back in 2012. But at the time, even the concept of talking about robots was very contentious.
Yes.
And I remember in America, it was, aren't robots there to take our jobs? And Leslie's written a book on the whole thing. I think you looked at 100 different customers. And I'll let you explain, what you actually found in terms of did these robots displace jobs? Did they take people's jobs away? No, they took tasks away and work away as part of their job, which was not a good use of human capital. And I just see the cognitive side of it is an extension of that idea, is what other tasks can we take which are robotic in nature, literally, and give them to a smart robot to do. So our goal is to sort of make our robots more intelligent, but they're still digital workers and digital co-workers. And I think if this technology is built by the business people, for the business people, then it takes on a completely different dynamic, because they know what the robot is doing. They know that it's stuff that they necessarily didn't want to do, or doing stuff that they can't do, that they've been able to express their ideas through this sort of this democratization of AI. So I think that's a really important part of it.
So Leslie, as we're talking about sort of some timelines here, as we're kind of looking at the future of businesses, and as they're trying to figure out where they are on the spectrum, where they are, are they, when they're looking broadly at this, are they at the very beginning? Is this the first combustion engine age of AI? Is it the 4 or 8 cylinder? Is it the race car or flying car? Like, where are we, and how do they sort of prepare and sort of step in the right spot?
There's a lot of misunderstanding about the ability of client companies to implement these types of technologies. The assumption is that the technology can be deployed very quickly and very seamlessly into these organizations, that these organizations have the retained capability to manage this in, and that the technology is perfectible. All these things are fairly mythical in my experience, the evidence I've got. In fact, the time horizons are going to be pretty long. For example, I think McKinsey did a great study and said that when you look at previous rounds of technology, it takes between 8 and 26 years for it to become fully optimized in a developed economy.
But we're
aside of some
right.
consumer technologies that obviously didn't quicker than that.
Right.
But corporates Then you add in the corporates and you discover that they have technology fatigue. They haven't digested the last round of technology. They're not up to speed with this technology. The market's obfuscating what this technology does and overpromising. They haven't built retained capability in this area. There's skill shortages already in this area of trying to implement robotic process automation, let alone cognitive automation and AI. That the technology is not necessarily there for business use. It's in the labs and outside the obvious candidates, Google, Amazon, Facebook, people like that. You won't see AI being utilized. We scoured the planet for 4 months looking for case studies to put in our book that we're launching next week, and we couldn't find any examples of AI as I've defined it. We've got examples of promising uses of cognitive automation, which I've defined earlier, and that's pretty immature, and we expect that to come dramatically through in the next 2 years. But the ability of the clients to actually deploy these is the inhibiting factor.
Right. I think that's such an interesting part. So Pam, when you're, obviously money has to come up. I mean, when you talked about corporations, and I've covered corporations over the years, and even when I look around at companies, I notice old technology. And it often has to do with money because they're not just changing one system, they're changing 500 systems that are all running the same thing because they have to, or they're implementing software. So how does that come into it? That discussion of, they spend more potentially upfront to engage with a cognitive technology, but they may save more in the long run. I mean, is that how that conversation works?
I think, and again, going back to the point, as Leslie says, there's, at the moment, we're not seeing large at-scale deployments of full AI, right? What we are seeing, though, and it really is starting to take up momentum on some of the earlier stage technologies. So when you look at RPA, and now how clients are getting braver, around doing more in terms of their processes and automating more of their processes because they're learning and they're seeing the value. And that's what it's about, Lance. It's about, as I said, let's not take the whole thing, let's take off a chunk, let's understand, let's develop the business case from that, which actually creates the investment case. Right.
Right.
And then because also by doing that automation, it releases, value, if you like, funding to potentially go on and do more. And so, and that's why I think, again, clients aren't, going whole scale. And also because they're trying to understand. I mean, we've talked about AI being an umbrella, haven't we? We've talked about it being automation, and then automation plus cognitive, and then advanced analytics, etc. And so it really is a journey. Yeah.
So, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I thought of this term before of like the Maslow's hierarchy of robots. Is there's a lot of stuff you've got. Yeah. Because you've got to get, you've got to think like security and make sure they're fed, and before you can start to get to these higher order things. And I think the reason 20 years ago we still had the same technologies, we couldn't apply them in an operational context. They were too expensive. They were too bespoke. They were too baroque. They needed several PhDs and hundreds of hours worth of compute time. I mean, if you look on your phone now, you have an incredibly sophisticated face recognition, very sophisticated voice recognition. Both of those technologies, even 10 years ago, would have been very, very expensive and inaccessible. So I think what's happening is we're getting these new technologies to be more accessible. And I would agree with the cognitive versus AI, and there's the term general purpose AI, general AI versus a narrow AI. And the general AI is very, very difficult. And some people think we may never even get to a general AI.
Right.
But what we're doing in these very specific narrow AI areas, and we've sort of got the digital worker, which is the thing that you can slot this different intelligence in. So we're trying to provide the body and the body of the robot, the virtual robot, and then you can put all of these skills into the head, and people can teach it to do different things.
Right.
But it won't just be able to work itself out and
Right.
go and onboard a customer. And,
I mean, it sounds like that kind of general sort of confusion I see even among consumers about robotics, and that when you say robot, they immediately think of something that might look like them, be a little bit scary, and do everything that they do, as opposed to the robotics in their car, like their anti-lock clock breaks, which
Yeah.
are there already. So
Yeah.
it's getting people to think about those smaller, almost edge cases that where it can have a quicker, more valuable impact, but isn't going to be super expensive.
Yes.
Is that one of the reasons that, Leslie, that you see a lot of companies defaulting to sort of the customer service area? That you think that is that a more, comfortable place for CIOs and companies to go because they think that
The back office is the more fundamental move with these emerging technologies. But customer service is an obvious, huge potential. I mean, what I find interesting about this, I just wanted to build on something Pam said earlier, because we're doing a study now on total cost of ownership. We know very little about total cost of ownership of these technologies. And what we're discovering, I mean, there are examples of good return on investment in these technologies. Typically, we found between 30% to 200% in the first year return on investment from employing these technologies, depending on the process.
Right.
There's a great study by Forrester Research that talks about a financial services company studied over 3 years, built to 600 robots, where the outlay was something like $15.4 million, but the return was about $49 million. So the potential is there, and we call it the triple win. It's possible to get customer value from the robots, shareholder value, and also employee value. But I think 25% of the value is in the technology, and 75% is how well you manage it. So, for example, I'll just give you 2 examples. One of the metrics that's very powerful with this technology is hours given back to the business as a result of its application.
Yeah.
But if you don't use those hours, the business value is nil.
right, vacation.
Really. More or less nil. Now, what would another one be? Well, some of these technologies, RPA technologies, that you can multi-skill them. You can get them to do lots of things. You can work them 24/7. But organizations don't. They very often work them the same hours that they work their human labor.
Right.
Because they're replicating the old work process.
Does the
Way
AI
of
check out at
working.
5
And
o'clock
so
or take
there's
lunch?
a massive missed potential. And this is the case with technology, historically, with all these technologies. We only use about 10% of the potential. So, however powerful these are, if you're not going to leverage them for strategic purpose, they're not going to be delivering. And that's why you very often get this IT productivity paradox, which is that we spent an enormous amount of money on IT, but where's the productivity? It's not exponential like the expend on IT.